Now we get into some of the real heart of the argument. And then, what is the heart of the argument? What's the question? You read it. All right. The question is free will. What role does free will play? That's part of it. Or you might sometimes say, he'll use this word too as kind of a synonym, choice. Free will, free choice. And the question of what role does free will play, what else might you say is the real question?
Is there free will?
Thank you. Is there a free will? Let's not beg the question. Let's not just take it for granted that there is. Is there free will? That's the real question. Erasmus says, well, duh, of course. And Luther says, no. Frankly, no. And this usually puts most students kind of back on their heels a little bit. Because most of us have kind of come to believe, oh yeah, free will is important. Oh yeah, free will. Yeah, that's part of what it means to be human, is free will. And we have become very comfortable with this because we use free will as a really nice answer to some tough questions. Why did Adam sin in the Garden of Eden? God gave him the choice, because God gave him free will. And I've heard this all laid out. God knew that it was a risky thing to give free will, but he didn't want to have automatic praise, because that wouldn't be real praise. That's like programming a computer to tell you I love you. Pff, what's that? So he took the risk, and he gambled, and he gave Adam free will, because that's what makes you human. And, well, Adam screwed it up. But see, that's free will. It has to be there. And we treasure this. We take it for granted. And Luther says, Adam didn't have free will. And do you have free will? Nope. But not even Adam. See, now that's the real tough part. Because most of us have come to realize, okay, well, I'm a Lutheran, for no free will, sin has ruined that. But Adam had it. And Luther would say, no, he didn't. Because Adam was created to do what? God's will. He was obedient to God. God's will was his. Now, did Adam do this because this was delightful to Adam? Well, sure, of course, because he's living the way he's supposed to live, in God's will. It's all good. But the idea that Adam had this free will and God was kind of rolling the dice to see what happened, come on, this is absurd. As if God's not in control. That's Luther's whole point. Is God God? Of course he is. And God's not risking anything. And it's like God saying, oh, rats, he sinned. Wish he hadn't done that. Now I got to come up with plan B. But this is precisely how people in our church are taught to think. Now, is that really what happened? So, Jesus was plan B?
No.
Remember this one? Didn't you guys read this last quarter? You read Plaker, Domestication and Transcendence? Oh, man. If you haven't read it, go back. Get it out. Read it. The whole point is, was Jesus plan B? No. It was the plan all along. God created knowing he would send Christ. God created planning to make Christ incarnate. That was always the plan. Now, that raises some really weird questions for us. Like, you mean he created intending it to happen? No. He's not responsible or the author of sin, and yet he was absolutely in control. And now we're into these sticky problems, and now free will starts to become a great answer to these sticky problems. And that's the attraction of free will. And that's one of the reasons why Luther's going after it. And this is why the doctrine that is being taught here in Bondage of the Will, I'm convinced the vast majority of the people in our pews have no clue of it and don't believe it. Absolutely don't believe it.
I've had experience with that.
And the rest of you will soon.
Well, I was at camp, and some girls started talking about free wills. Like, that's not what Luther taught. What? No, free will. And just gave the crypto-Baptist response, and it was like, well, 1 Corinthians 2:14, Romans 8:7. Well, that doesn't mean anything.
No, Scripture only means something when it's convenient, and that's how we operate. So, go ahead, Joel.
Do we ever talk about angelic free will?
I don't. Do you want to?
No, thank you for taking it literally. I mean, there was sin before. In a sense, there was sin before Adam sinned. There was. Yeah. I know we don't talk of it that way.
Well, you see, you're starting to get into questions about the source of evil and where it's coming from. And yeah, you have the angelic free will, which again, see, I'm not really even ready to grant that. Here's the all right, let's deal with this one now. Let's just kind of deal with the big question. What is the source of this evil? Where did this thing come from? This is a big question. And people go and say, well, what's Genesis 3 say? Well, Genesis 3 says the serpent came and tempted Eve, so the serpent was the problem, and it was Satan's fall, and that's the source. But that's really not the point. And this is what Bonhoeffer gets at, if you remember this from last quarter, in Creation and Fall, that what Bonhoeffer's really getting, he says, don't go blaming the serpent, because the serpent's just the spokesman. The real problem is man's rebellious choice. And that's all that really matters, is man's choice. And see, now I think this is the right answer. And this is kind of what Plaker gets at, too. And this is, I believe, is the right thing. Any attempt to try to pin down the source of evil, it really amounts to doing a theodicy. Trying to figure out where it came from so we can make God look a little better. But the fact of the matter is, you have this situation. God creates a perfect world. Puts Adam and Eve into this perfect world and says, hey, have a blast. Is it all good? Yep. And God says, thrive, be obedient to me. Don't touch that tree over there. That's one of your ways to show your obedience, and just do what you do. And Luther says, every time that Adam and Eve walked past that tree and didn't touch it, they were worshiping God. Kind of a cool angle Luther brings. He calls the tree the place where Adam worshipped. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It wasn't this kind of, oh, poison tree. It was like, yeah, there's that tree. I can't eat from that. When I walk by without eating from it, I'm honoring God. I'm worshiping him. Cool thought. And so it's all good. But yet, somehow, Adam and Eve decided, no, we'll do our own thing. And that's the huge question. Why? Was it because of something God put in them? No. Was it a defect in their creation? No. Well, then, it must have an outside source. Well, no. No. And then you're left saying, it doesn't add up. And the answer is exactly right. It doesn't add up. And so we're kind of right back to the crux theologorum here again. Where's it coming from? If you've got a sovereign God, how can you have a completely sovereign God and yet have man being held responsible for disobeying God when he has no reason to disobey him? And that's why Plaker says, I think brilliantly, sin is frankly irrational. It never makes sense. It never makes sense. And this is true. And you guys are going to live this. You're going to see it in parish practice. You're going to see people coming in with sordid tales of stuff. And you're going to ask this idiot guy who's been involved in an affair, you're going to look at him and say, why did you do this? And he's going to have this blank look on his face, completely blank look, and he's going to say, I don't know. And that's the truth. And it doesn't do you any good to go probing for something more because you won't find it. But see, we don't like that. We want to have a reason. Because if we have a reason, we can feel better about it. Well, then it won't happen to me. Or I can explain it. But there, frankly, is no reason. People are idiots. They sin. Sinners sin. Why? Don't know. And should that scare the willies out of you? Well, frankly, it should. And it should make every one of us say, man, I guess I'm not beyond any of this stuff. Maybe I need to be really careful. Exactly. Point taken. That's what I think is one of the big things here. So the truth of the matter is, then, we don't have an answer for where the source of evil is, beyond to say that man is responsible. And now this should start sounding familiar, because we're heading back to where I was last time with the whole crux theologorum. What are the two big points? Divine monergism and human responsibility. And that's exactly where we land again. And now you begin to see why I said this is a crucial issue. It pops up everywhere. Everywhere. Okay? All right, yeah.
For fear of playing devil's advocate.
Oh, go ahead, sir.
In this situation then.
Yes.
But can't you say the same about the serpent? Because the serpent then had its own God-pleasing will.
Oh, absolutely.
That chose to.
Well, yeah. Well, you see, we know from later dialogue that the serpent is not acting in unilaterally. He's got satanic influence because this tied in with Satan in Revelation. So yeah, but see, ultimately you're back to the same problem. Well, then why did he do it? Or, and so you're right, it's the same issue. And so even with Satan, well, why did Satan rebel? Who knows? Who knows? There are hints about desire to be like God, but that's the same thing was motivating Adam and Eve. But why would they desire that when they got everything they need? Don't know. And you're just left with this kind of irrationality of it. And any effort to try to solve it is really a theodicy. And don't do theodicies. Just leave it alone. We're not playing that game. Drew.
So I know this is theodicy, but isn't the sovereign God in charge of what happens in the universe?
Of course. But you can't blame him for evil.
Doesn't make sense.
I know it does. Well, thank you. You're exactly right. It doesn't make sense. And you see, and I'm glad you guys are starting to wrestle with this, because last time when I laid out the crux telegram, you all sitting there, okay, that's cool, took notes, yeah, okay, got that. and you walk out here glib. Come on. You're not thinking about it enough. Because when you start to really wrestle with it, and it starts to become unsettling. And if it's not unsettling to you, you really haven't thought about it enough. Just the way it is. And because the more you wrestle with it, you're thinking, oh, man, that doesn't work. Now you're starting to realize the reality of it. Because it doesn't.
So we're just pointing back to faith.
Ultimately, we have to simply cling to the promise of God. It says, this is the way it is. And trust me. Trust me. Let me be God. And I'll take care of you. And as Quakers say, and as Luther says, you look to the cross, not to what you don't know. And that's what he says in here. Hidden God, reveal God, preach God, not preach God. That's where that comes from. That's in here as well. It's great stuff. All right, good? Okay so far here? Okay. So the big question then is, free will, does it even exist? And what Luther ends up saying is, no. No. It's an illusion. You think you've got it? You don't. There's no such thing. I'll give you one more thing here. Let's kind of pause here while we're sitting at the railroad tracks waiting for the train to go by. One more picture here, and this also comes back from last quarter, from the book you read from Plaker, which I reference this a lot because I think he has some really keen insight into kind of these big divide issues that are going on. He uses this really nice illustration which helps to kind of get your mind around how you have a God who is sovereign with divine monergism, and yet human responsibility going. And that's this really great illustration he uses of a classroom having a discussion about a play. And I find this to be really helpful. So let's say we're talking in this class about Romeo and Juliet. And we're discussing today the death of Romeo. And the question I put before you was, why did Romeo die? So you guys are offering your answers. And somebody says, well, Romeo died because he was a stupid male, and he woke up and saw Juliet dead, so he just despaired like an idiot and killed himself. That's his fault. Someone else says, no, it's Juliet's fault. Juliet should have known that something could go wrong, and she shouldn't have risked this whole silly plan, so it's Juliet's fault. Someone says, well, no, it's obviously the monk's fault. He didn't get the message soon enough to Romeo, and so he messed it up, so it's his fault. And then somebody else says, no, it's the Montagues and the Capulets who are to blame for the feud. And someone else says, no, it's Italian society, because they're the ones who allowed the feud, and away we go. All right? Someone else wants to blame the church or whatever. Okay? Then somebody, brilliant guy in the back row, says, I think it's because that's how Shakespeare wrote it. Now, at that point, what is the appropriate response from the teacher? The teacher should say at that point, you idiot. Stupid answer. Now, I know you don't still have to say that to a student, but that's the truth. It's a stupid thing to say. It's completely out of order. Duh, we should all turn around and look and say, what are you talking about? Shakespeare wrote it. Of course Shakespeare wrote it. We all know that, you idiot. So what? That's not even relevant. What's relevant is we're talking about inside the story, what forces are at work. And the author is irrelevant. It's not like Romeo saying, okay, what are you going to tell me to do, Shakespeare? What's it today? Come on. Inside the story, they're living as the forces in the story, and that's what we sort out. And so for someone to kind of say, well, I think it was because Shakespeare wrote it that way. Come on. Come on. You're not even, this is not even worthy of response. Now, see, it's the same kind of thing here. So we live our lives in this world, and we're doing our thing, and we're figuring things out, and we're taking responsibility, and it's all very real to us, and it's very important, and we're doing these things. But yet, ultimately, there is the God who is the author and the director, and he's doing the whole thing, and it's all playing out just exactly as he has planned it. And yet, what we do matters and is important. Now, every illustration starts to break down because there's obviously connectiveness here, but that kind of gets at it. And so we live our lives, and we have this sense of making choices and deciding things and free will, and we have this feeling of doing these things by our free choice and freedom. And in reality, God's God, and it's all happening just the way He's laid it out. And you say, well, then those are incompatible. How do you hold them together? And you don't. You don't. You just live with both of them. It's just the way it's got to be. All right. And I'm reminded of a Foxtrot cartoon of a few years ago. You know Foxtrot? Some of you don't know it. But the sharp little kid, the second-born boy, who's the really brilliant one, is playing catch with his classmate, and they're holding the football, and the kid's holding the ball and says, "Go deep!" So the kid stops and thinks, so can human free will coexist with a divine sovereign being? And then the other kid responds, too deep. And so then he goes, if Joker killed Batman, would he really be happy? So, that was good.